All right, so I'm not in my normal spot today. I actually wasn't planning on making this video. It's supposed to be part of another video that's coming out in just a few days, but I've gotten hundreds of comments and DMs asking how I do my color grading. So I figured let's make this its own video. And by the way, my secret sauce is actually in my free LUT that I've linked somewhere on screen and in the description below. So go download that, go open up DaVinci Resolve or get the free version of DaVinci Resolve if you don't already have it, and you can follow along. And by the way, I'm not a pro colorist, but do you know who is? It's this guy named Jake, who actually has a crash course inside of Full-Time Filmmaker. So to the 40,000 or so of you who are members of Full-Time Filmmaker, go check that out. And if you're not, what are you doing? I'll put a link below so you can go join our community and expand your knowledge. So in DaVinci Resolve, I'll pull in my clips and then I'll pop on over to the color tab. I've actually gone ahead and color graded most of these clips, so this should go pretty quickly. But everything, as you've seen, is shot on the Sony FX3. I like to shoot in S-Log3. I think it gives you the best dynamic range, and once you know how to use S-Log3, it's really easy to work with. So I thought this was a pretty good clip, that one-handed egg crack. I definitely practiced that. First thing I like to do when I'm color grading is actually make a bunch of nodes. So nodes are like layers, but instead of going up, they go from left to right. So I'm gonna make 4 right here, and then I'm gonna make 4 right here, and then I'm gonna make another 4 right there. So we're gonna make different exposure and color and effect adjustments on these nodes. The easiest way to understand my node tree specifically here is that these top nodes are for color correction. So just exposure, converting this log to a more Rec 709 color profile. Any temperature adjustments if we need to make those. This middle layer is more for the color grade, so we kind of bring in that stylized look. I'll put my LUT here on this row and then make some modifications as well. And then down here are like final adjustments. So like an S curve or some film grain or halation and a couple of other things. We'll get to that. So first, let's actually change this from log over to a Rec 709 profile. So I use color space transform, and in really simple terms, it just takes that log footage and it adds contrast and color so it just looks like a more normal image. So we're gonna go over here and find our Sony Gamut 3 Cine, which is what we were using, and then S-Log3. And I'm gonna change this to Rec 709 and that one to Rec 709A. So now just with that one node, we've gone from log to a pretty normal color space. On the node before that, we're gonna add some HDR. So I like to pull up my shadows to about 12-ish, pull my exposure down. And what that kind of does for me is it makes that dynamic range artificially look just a little bit smoother. Kind of lowers that contrast as well. So I'll label that so you guys can see we got our HDR, we got our color space transform. On this one, what we're gonna do is modify our primary wheels. So these are our primary wheels. We got lift, gamma, gain, and offset. And here on the right-hand side, you see our waveform scope. So this shows us the exposure and where the color is sitting in our image. And this is a direct reflection of what you see on screen. So you see there's all these highlights here on the right hand side, and you see those highlights reflected here. Same with some of the shadows. You see the dark part of my shirt is right there, and those show up here on the right hand side. And then over here you get that egg yolk, and you can actually see some of that color from the yolk in there as well. So waveforms are really cool. If you want to learn more, obviously go check out the coloring crash course. But I'm going to make some very, very minor adjustments. I tend to pull up my gamma just a little bit because I think it brings out more detail in those midtones, the skin especially here. And honestly, I'm gonna keep my lift and gain where they are for the moment. Next, what I wanna do is actually drop down here, and this is where I'm gonna add my LUT. So this LUT you can actually go download right now for free. I'm gonna bring that over there. And honestly, that's kind of the secret sauce. You can recreate this from scratch, obviously, but the LUT is just the quickest way to throw that on there. Now I'll bounce over to this one, and I'm gonna do just some tint adjustments. Now, if you look at what this image looks like without the LUT, looks normal. Once you put the LUT on, it has a pretty strong green hue. And if that's what you're going for, that's great. Obviously, I've designed the LUT to look like that more or less, but I still tend to manipulate that green and just pull it down a tad. So on the tint adjustment node, I'm gonna grab this gain wheel right here, and I am going to pump in just a little bit of magenta, a little bit of blue, just to kind of neutralize that green hue. Looks good enough for me. On this node, we're gonna bounce over and actually adjust our skin tones. Now there's probably some more sophisticated ways to adjust skin tones, but this is just the way that I do it, and I've always done it this way, and it tends to work out just fine. I like to pop into my curves, and then I'll adjust the hue versus, so hue versus hue, hue versus saturation, and hue versus luma. I've also changed my scope to the vector scope, which can show us where our skin tones are sitting. I feel like these skin tones look a little bit on the magenta side. I'm gonna go ahead and grab that, and I will pull it a touch to the green. I'm pulling this part down just a little bit. Hit that again for the saturation. And I'm gonna pull that up as well, right around there. Something I'm actually gonna do is bounce back over to our primaries, and I'm going to add a touch more color to this image using the color boost, just a little bit. All right, we're almost done. Let's go down here to this node, and actually this is going to be our curves. Switch that back to the waveform, curves, and we're gonna do a subtle S curve. S curves are really great for just making the image pop, giving you some good contrast. So we're adjusting that between the shadows and the highlights. I like to pull this part up just a little bit and that part down just a little bit. All right, and then two more things to spice this up. We're gonna add our film look creator right there. So let's go ahead and grab that out of the gates. Don't love the way that looks. We're gonna pull down that color blend, and we're gonna pull down the film look blend, because I don't wanna adjust the colors. We already got the colors where we want them to be, but I do wanna use the halation in here. Basically what halation does is it mimics more or less like a mist filter, and sometimes you see a little bit of color actually peeking from those highlights, and so the halation is actually pretty cool. It's kind of subtle in this one. It's not going to be super noticeable, but I almost always add it. I also like bloom. I tend to throw in a pretty good amount of bloom because I think it makes the image look a bit softer, and it does a very similar thing to halation. And then finally, just a little bit of grain. I like either 65 or 35. 35 is probably going to be what I choose for this one, and I'll pull up the intensity just a little bit. So here's without film look and with film look. It basically just takes out that digital processing from your camera and makes it look a little bit more authentic. It's also adding a vignette on here. I just hadn't turned it off. So the vignette kind of just adds a little darkness around the edges. Okay, last thing, what we're gonna do is add a radial blur. And this is kind of like, I mean, besides the LUT, this is kind of like my secret sauce. So you toss that on there. Initially, it's gonna look a little bit hectic, but the reason I like a radial blur is because it draws the viewer's attention to the center of the image or wherever you want them to be looking. So I'm just gonna adjust our blur strength. And now we have an incredibly cinematic image. Look at that, cracking the egg. That is a beautiful shot. And now you can take that shot, right click, grab still, and now you can take any other clip on the timeline and apply that grade. And it should look pretty close. You might need to make some final adjustments, but generally if you color grade one shot, you can apply that grade to pretty much anything else and then make some minor changes.
Guys, that's pretty much it. If you want more advanced color grading tutorials, you know where to go. And as always, if you have any further questions, please let me know.